You're scrolling through Slate Auto's website and you see their sleek new electric truck. You think, I'll reserve one now for just $50. It's fully refundable after all. But before you click that button, here's what you really need to know. First off, that $50 reservation fee isn't a deposit, and it isn't a down payment on your future truck. It won't earn interest, and it won't be parked in a special escrow account. You're simply buying the option to buy later. Slate is under no obligation to sell you a truck, and you're under no obligation to buy one until you execute their final purchase agreement years from now. Remember, they can tweak the specs, raise the price, and adjust fees like shipping or documentation costs any time before you sign that paperwork. Speaking of timelines, don't pencil late 2026 in permanent marker. Slate makes it clear that delivery dates are non-binding estimates. Your place in line depends not just on when you reserved, but also on when you actually place your order, sign the documents, and where you want the truck delivered. Delay signing, and you might find yourself slipping back in the queue, even if you were among the first to reserve. Now, let's say you change your mind. You can cancel at any time and get your $50 back, unless Slate decides, at its sole discretion, that they suspect you're a reseller. They outright refuse resale certificates, and they can cancel your reservation for any reason. So if they sniff out the slightest hint you're flipping trucks for profit, you could lose your spot without so much as an explanation. On the legal side, their limitation of liability clause is brutal. If anything goes wrong under the reservation, tech glitches, misinformation, whatever, your only remedy is that $50 refund. You can't claim lost business, missed opportunities, or any other damages. It's all or nothing. And here's a big one. Any dispute over this reservation, no matter how tiny, goes to binding arbitration. Under the American Arbitration Association's rules, you waive your right to a jury trial and you can't join with other customers in a class action. Want to opt out? You have exactly 60 days from your reservation date to email optout@slate.auto. Miss that window and you lose that right forever. Plus, any claim you might have must be filed within 1 year or it's barred altogether. Finally, everything is governed by Michigan law. If you do end up in court over an excluded issue, say enforcing intellectual property rights or repossessing the truck, that court will be in Michigan. So if you live across the country, brace for unfamiliar procedures and potentially inconvenient travel. So, before that $50 click, pause and ask yourself, am I comfortable paying for an undecided option that locks me into arbitration, gives me minimal recourse, and leaves my reservation entirely at Slate's discretion? If not, think twice. And if you decide to proceed, mark your calendar for that 60-day opt-out deadline. Because once it's gone, your legal rights are gone with it.